Hi everyone, this is a video to review what we've done on this worksheet called Intervals Introduction, and you can download this worksheet on Blackboard under on the dashboard section under Tuesday, March 27th. The first part of the worksheet is called the chromatic scale review. Just ignore the review part because I think we actually haven't talked about chromatic scales yet, but it's very simple. Instead of the pattern of whole steps and half steps for major scales, a chromatic scale only consists of all half steps. Okay? So in the chromatic scale, we are starting with a note, and then we're writing all half steps all the way up or down. So when we're going up, it's called ascending. We're going down, it's called descending. And as always, when you're talking about half steps, always refer to your piano keyboard chart or an actual keyboard. So for example, from C, the next note up would be a half step up, which would be this key. And when we're doing an ascending chromatic scale, I'm only going to use sharps. So the next note would be C sharp. From C sharp, the next half step up would be D. So I'm going to write D. And you're going to go all the way up the scale that way, all the way to C. The last note is C. The same thing, we can do this going down, and we start here with B flat. And again, you can do this on any note. So the B flat descending chromatic scale starts with B flat, and then we're going down a half step to this note, which is A. And then we're going to go down again to describe this note, and that's going to be A flat, and so forth. Okay, so that's pretty simple. Now, the reason why we talk about chromatic scales here first is that counting half steps, okay, is going to be very important as we talk about intervals. An interval is a distance that we attribute, that we describe between two notes. The two notes can either be sounded together, like a chord, or two notes that are part of a chord, or like a melody, one after another. Okay, and that's what we're doing in this standard. So an interval is the distance between two notes, and the interval here is described in with two components. The first thing is the size. The second thing is the quality. And we're going to start talking about both of these attributes. The first one is pretty straightforward. For the size, we're only talking about the letter names of the notes as written. Okay? And we're counting the letter names using the musical alphabet. So that's the next thing we're going to do. The quality has to do with counting half steps between the two notes. So that has more to do with the actual note on the keyboard, whether there's a sharp or flat associated with it. But for the first part, we're only talking about the letter name. Okay, so let's take a look at the worksheet here, which would give you a little bit more of an idea. The second part of the exercise asks you to go to this URL and it's an online exercise for you to name the size of the interval. So size is only going to be described by a number, and that's always going to be either a second, third, fourth, etc. Okay, that's the size. So in this exercise, you'll be encountering something like these notes. Okay, so these are all notes that are two notes sounded together, okay, and you're trying to determine the size. Okay, so after you've done the URL here, the exercise, and think about how you find the size of each interval, take a look at number 3 here, which shows you a list of diatonic intervals based on the C major scale. The term diatonic intervals refers to intervals where the top note is also part of the major scale built on the bottom note. Okay, so these are all notes, intervals using notes from the C major scale. There are no sharps or flats. In addition, you see the bottom note of each pair of notes is always C. So these are the diatonic intervals of the C major scale. The first thing you're going to do here is just to name the size, and that's pretty straightforward. Again, you're looking at the letter names of each of these. So C and D here. So that's 1, 2, that's the second. Again, I'm counting the musical alphabet. From C, D to E, that's 1, 2, 3 letters. Okay, that's the third. Again, there are no sharps or flats here, but even if there are, I'm disregarding them. I'm only looking at the letter names. From C, D, E, and F, okay, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's a fourth. Okay, and you're going to go all the way up here, and this is just going to be like that. So you're going to fill that in this way. Okay. The final thing you're going to do here in this row is you're going to count the number of half steps in each interval. Okay, so now we're looking at the notes again on the keyboard, but now we're counting how many half steps there are between these two notes. So from C to D, there's 1 and 2 half steps. You're gonna write that down here. From C to E, that's 1, 2, 3, 4 half steps. Okay, gonna write that down here. And as you count the half steps, there are 5 half steps in the fourth. There are 5 half steps in the fourth, the 7 half steps in the fifth, 9 half steps in the sixth, and 11 half steps in the seventh. Right? So that's the first part of the worksheet.